What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to the Round 2 prediction video for the 2014 NHL playoffs. First of all, thanks to the NHL for giving me all of about 10 seconds of breathing room to get this video out, as Round 1 just ended last night, and Round 2 starts tonight. So very small window of opportunity to get it in, but we're getting it done here. What we're going to be talking about, we got a little bit of clerical stuff to clear up at the beginning of the video, then we're going to go into both the Eastern and Western conferences in this video. We're going to talk about who won in Round 1 and then get on to the predictions in Round 2. So again, just a very tiny little bit of clerical stuff to clear up before we get into it. Just want to toss a shout out there to JEFFY, who is a commenter on the last couple of videos that I've done. He put up one of his own videos talking about Boston beating Detroit and a little bit of a preview of Boston Montreal. I'm going to put his YouTube channel in the description to this video. Everybody go check him out. Sub to JEFFY. He's a good guy. And just another thing I wanted to bring up, I had a comment on one of the last videos about how, and this is a person I don't think who has ever commented on one of my videos before, but he found the video distracting because of the number of quick cuts. I think the way he put it was, it's clear that this video is very heavily edited. I don't make any mystery about the style of video that I do. I'm very heavy on the quick cuts, basically because I don't want a ton of dead air. My videos are long enough as they are, so I don't really want a ton of dead air in the videos, but apparently this person found it distracting. What do you guys think? Does my style bother you, like with the quick cuts and everything like that? Would you rather see less editing on the videos in those terms? You guys let me know in the comments section below, and if you want to see something different, I guess we can try to do something a little bit different. If I leave some of that stuff in, the consequence is going to be longer videos, so that's going to be up to you guys. I'm going to keep doing this the way that I've been doing it until somebody or a couple people or a bunch of people tell me that they don't like it. So you guys let me know if you want me to keep going the way that I've been doing the videos already, or if you want to see a style that's slightly different. We're going to start in the Eastern Conference, just a very quick rundown of what happened in Round 1 in the East before we go on to Round 2. I was 3-1 picking the Eastern Conference in the first round, which was great. I picked Montreal over Tampa, that worked out. I picked Pittsburgh over Columbus, that worked out. And I picked the Rangers over Philly, and that worked out. I did miss the Boston-Detroit series. I thought Detroit had enough to take them out in 7. That didn't happen. Boston, of course, winning that series in 5. So your second round matchups in the Eastern Conference look like this. Atlantic #1 Boston Bruins, President's Trophy winning, had a fantastic season, taking on #3 in the Atlantic Division, the Montreal Canadiens. These two teams have played each other in the playoffs a lot. These are two teams that do not like each other, and this is why me and old JEFFY are not beefing, but we're going to be a little diametrically opposed here. And the other matchup in the Eastern Conference sees Metropolitan #1 Pittsburgh Penguins take on Metropolitan #2 New York Rangers. But we're going to start with that Atlantic Division matchup, Boston-Montreal. It is probably the marquee matchup of the second round. Everybody wants to see what's going to happen, and that matchup starts tonight in the first game on Thursday night, so I'm obviously very, very invested in it, being a Montreal fan. The season series actually saw Montreal take 3 of the 4 games, outscoring Boston 9-7. It's worth noting that 3 of those 4 games had Peter Budaj in net for Montreal, not Carey Price. As we mentioned in the previous video, Boston was a top 5 team this year in both goals scored and goals against. Montreal managing to get into the top 10 in goals against, but did not crack the top 20 in the league in goals scored. Been a bit of a different story here in the playoffs. Boston only averaged 2.8 goals per game in that series with Detroit, only ranking them 11th out of 16 teams that made the playoffs. However, they only gave up 1.2 goals per game, which was far and away the best mark of the first round. Montreal, on the other hand, ended up being the team with top 5 rankings in both goals scored and goals against, being the only team to average 4 goals per game in the first round. Based on the regular season numbers here, the story of this series could possibly have come on the penalty kill. Both of these teams ranked inside the top 10 in penalty killing this year. Montreal at 85.1%, ranking 4th. However, they did have a lot of problems on the power play. As we mentioned, they were only tied for 19th, whereas Boston had the 3rd best power play in the league this year. In the playoffs, been a little bit different, except for Boston on the power play. 37.5% in that series with Detroit. That is huge. They are ranking at the top of all 16 playoff teams in that category. They also have the second best penalty kill at 90%. Montreal struggled a bit on special teams in the first round, only about a 15.4% clip on their power play, with the penalty kill ranking tied for 14th out of 16 playoff teams at only 71.4%. This is a big advantage for the Bruins. Where Montreal really stepped up their game in the first round was in their two-way game. As we mentioned, in terms of shots per game and shots allowed per game, Montreal did not rank higher than 22nd in either one of those categories throughout the season. But in the first round, in that series with Tampa Bay, they ranked third in shots against per game at only 26 per game, and ranked fourth in shots for per game at 34.5. Boston, by the way, is essentially keeping the same clip that they had in the regular season, with an extra 0.3 shots per game while allowing an extra 1.3 shots per game. Big X factor for the Bruins in this series is going to be their physicality. Boston obviously does a great job of using the size advantage that they typically have against most teams, and especially against Montreal. There are so many instances in the last 3 to 4 years of Boston really exercising that size advantage that they have over the Canadiens and doing it very well. Major X factor for the Canadiens is going to be discipline and confidence. Boston loves to drag these teams into Boston's game, which is trying to play physical with them, which often doesn't work out, trying to be chippy with them, which often doesn't work out, get under team skins, and make them take bad penalties. It is worth noting that Montreal was the least penalized team in round one. This team needs to stay humble, first of all, and they need to avoid that garbage. They can't let Boston drag them into that after the whistle, pushing and shoving, and punches get thrown, and penalties get taken. Montreal did have a good penalty kill this year, but they've got to be disciplined. They can't let Boston drag them into that garbage after the whistle, or else Boston is going to clobber them. Now, I know Montreal took 3 out of 4 games against Boston this year, and a lot of people called it a fluke, and maybe some of them were, and there's really no way Montreal beats Boston in the second round, right? Come on, folks. As badly as I want to be right, as badly as I want to make the predictions that are correct and feel good and come on here that I got all of these right, you can't fight the heart. I'm taking my boys. I'm taking Montreal. Call me crazy, but I'm going against the Bruins for a second time in this playoffs. I'm going to take Montreal to beat Boston in 7 games. And yes, that does mean that Montreal beats Boston in Game 7 in Boston. I think they split the first 4 games. I think this is a 2-2 series going into Game 5. I think Boston wins Game 5 in Boston. Montreal comes back, wins Game 6 to stave off elimination in Montreal. And then in Game 7, maybe it goes to overtime. It would be very apropos for these two teams. But I'm going to take Montreal to beat Boston in Game 7 and go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Just do me a favor. Have the hatred train form an orderly line to the left, please. And I'm going to go even further. I'm going to jump right on the Homer train right now. If Montreal beats Boston, Montreal's winning the Cup this year. Because if they can beat Boston, there's nobody they can't beat. Now let's take a look at that Metropolitan Division matchup. Number 1, Pittsburgh Penguins. Number 2, New York Rangers. Season series here was 2-2. Both teams won 2 of the 4 games. New York did outscore Pittsburgh 14-13 in those 4 games. Again, we talked about it last round. Pittsburgh has a top 5 offense. New York has a top 5 defense. So this is a classic matchup of offense versus defense. In the playoffs, Pittsburgh has kept up their scoring prowess, averaging 3.5 goals per game, ranking them 3rd, whereas New York only gave up 2.29 goals per game in their series with Philadelphia, ranking them 2nd. So to be perfectly honest, these guys are keeping pace with what they did in the regular season. Pittsburgh's power play did drop off a little bit from what they did in the regular season, losing about 3 percentage points. They only ranked 7th out of the 16 playoff teams in terms of power play efficiency, but New York's power play fell off the face of the planet in that series with Philadelphia, only 10.3%, having them tied for 13th. Luckily for the Rangers, or a bit unluckily for the Rangers, neither one of these teams can kill a penalty to save their soul. These two teams rank no higher than 12th out of the 16 teams that made the playoffs in penalty kill in the first round. Pittsburgh put on an overwhelming offensive display in their first round series against Columbus, averaging 36.5 shots per game, which leads the NHL by a good clip in the playoffs. The Rangers, on the other hand, were able to pull some of that magic back from a couple of years ago in terms of blocking shots, keeping pucks away from the net. They only gave up 25.6 points per game on average to the Flyers, which ranks them second in the playoffs. Major X factor in this series for the Penguins, getting flurry with it. Coach Bilesma has to somehow, some way, get into Marc-Andre Fleury's head and says, stop worrying so much about the playoffs, because as soon as he gets into the playoffs, seems like he blows up like a San Jose Shark. Major X factor for the Rangers, they got to keep on blocking. Pittsburgh, as we said, puts the most pucks on net in the first round so far in these playoffs, where the Rangers ranked number 2 in terms of keeping pucks away from their net. So they really need to keep that up. They have a gem there in Henrik Lundqvist, one of the best in the game, and if they can keep pucks away from that net, Lundy can do the rest. If I were the Rangers, I'd be shooting for that magic 30 shots on goal plateau. Pittsburgh averaging 36.5, Rangers only giving up 25.6. If the Rangers can keep Pittsburgh to under 30 shots, I think they have a great chance in any game. And I actually think they're going to be able to do it. Crosby has not been able to get rolling. Malkin, outside of the one game where he had a hat trick, also really hasn't been able to get rolling. I think the Rangers can pull this off. So stop the presses. I am taking both of the underdogs in the Eastern Conference. I'm going to take the New York Rangers to upset the Pittsburgh Penguins in 6 games to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think they split the first 2 games in Pittsburgh, but I think New York wins both games on home ice in MSG. I think the Rangers have a 3-1 lead in this series after 4 games. Pittsburgh wins Game 5 on home ice to stave off elimination. New York brings it back to New York, wins it in Game 6 on home ice. So I'm going to take the Rangers to set up an Eastern Conference Finals matchup of Montreal and New York. Now let's go to the West.